Our story, the one that Rhonda read, contains 3 words that are fascinating for our times and worth some unpacking. We're told Jesus teaches as one who has authority, that his fame spread quickly, and that even demons obeyed him. Authority, fame, and demons. Sounds like a presidential race we've been reading about. Or something you might put on an epitaph for someone. Imagine that. What does the word authority mean? How do we understand demons in our time? And what kind of fame did Jesus have, given that in a few short years he was executed in a most cruel way while no one seemed to do anything to stop it? The kind of authority the text refers to is the ability and the weight that seemed to be attached to Jesus' teaching. When he taught in the synagogue, he wasn't repeating things they had heard before. The crowd, we are told, was amazed and astonished. When is the last time you were amazed and astonished by something you heard? Jesus must have been a great teacher, which is the ability he demonstrated. We know he made great use of stories and parables. We can imagine the weight of what he was teaching had something to do with the seriousness of saying anything that wasn't in agreement with the Roman Empire and those in power. Jesus did not have a position of power, but his teaching made him sound as if he had authority, more than the scribes who actually had official roles in the synagogue. The concept of demon is a bit tough. Many of the translations use the word unclean, which is the word that was in the translation Rhonda read this morning. And the idea of clean and unclean is difficult because it takes us right back to the caste system, so prevalent in our culture and so many others. Here in the U.S., it harkens back to Jim Crow laws and the refusal to let blacks and whites use the same water fountains, swimming pools, bathrooms, restaurants, schools, because of this idea of clean and unclean. It's so deeply offensive, and we have to be careful what we do with it. In the Greek, when you look at that word, the meaning here for demon is like a word for bad angels, someone gone awry. Someone having a demon or being a demon is not an easy concept for us, and most of us don't have firsthand experience with this. At its simplest, a demon seems to be something that possesses someone and keeps them from living an integrated life. When demons have voices that come out of a person, it reminds us of diagnosed mental illnesses like schizophrenia, which can sometimes manifest in voices, or multiple personality disorder, which can also manifest in a variety of voices. People with these conditions are still outcast in so many ways. Jesus wanted those who were possessed to be free of those voices, those demons, those things that kept them from living integrated lives. The last word, fame, sounds more lofty than I think it was because of how we tend to think of fame. The word really just means hearsay, report, or rumor. In other words, the gossip mill got to work and word spread fast that Jesus was one who taught and cast out demons with authority. The same people who heard those rumors or reports would quickly begin to wonder how Jesus got his authority. Fame is not something to fear or to pursue necessarily. I want you to think back for a minute and see if you can remember what your first experience was of someone either giving you authority or assuming you had it. For some of us, it might have been when we got our first babysitting job, and some gullible kid and parent somewhere thought we were grown up enough to be in charge, so they looked to us as the authority figure. For others, it was when we got our first job and a boss gave us some authority and we had to act like we knew what we were doing until we did. For others of us, it might have been when we were given authority in our families to either take care of a younger sibling or go to the local store to buy what was needed, or some other big responsibility. When I was thinking about when I first really felt as though I had or was given authority, it was definitely while I was in college. There were many situations I found myself in where I had or was given authority, but one situation stood out to me as I look back. When I was a sophomore in college, I was made captain of my volleyball team. The summer after that year, one of our players had a family tragedy where one member murdered 2 other members due to mental illness. The coach called me and said she wanted me to go to Los Angeles with her because we wanted to meet with this player so we could figure out if she should come back to school or not. She was trying to decide what would be best for her. My coach looked to me as one with authority in that situation because she was unsure of how to handle it. All during that year, she had relied on me to provide spiritual and counseling support to the other players, and in many ways to be a mediator between her and the team. In our players' eyes, I had authority, maybe in part because I was their captain, but I am sure it was in part because of my coach giving me so much responsibility and relying on me to lead the team spiritually. It's a strange thing to be aware of, and an even stranger thing to consider why some people are given authority and others are not. Why some people take authority and others do not. Why was Jesus seen as one with authority? What is authority good for, and how should it be used? Now, we've been in the Gospel of Mark these last couple of weeks, and I want to remind you that Mark's Gospel is thought to be the earliest and original Gospel from which the others have borrowed. If you read the 3 synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, or even the Gospel of John, you would notice quickly how short Mark's Gospel is compared to the others. There's no birth narrative. There's no Sermon on the Mount. There's a ton of detail in the other Gospels that is not included in Mark's Gospel. Many of us find it intriguing for just that reason. Mark did not waste space or words, so the accounts he did include, like ours today, seem to be important to him in some way. Last week we read the story of the calling of Simon, Andrew, James, and John to follow Jesus. This week we have the story of Jesus and the followers going to Capernaum. Remember, it was on the Sea of Galilee, which is where Jesus centered his ministry because of what Herod Antipas was doing in terms of monetizing the lake. So Jesus centered his ministry there, and then the story tells us Jesus goes into a synagogue and does some teaching. We need a little more information about synagogues in that time so we have an idea of what exactly is happening here. The most obvious function of synagogues is what the archaeological evidence has shown. Synagogues were places of assembly and discussion for whole communities. As premier gathering places, synagogues that belonged to the municipality were political institutions, much like town halls or community centers, as much as they were religious institutions. These are what some scholars call public synagogues. There are some examples in the New Testament of synagogues, like the one at Nazareth mentioned in Mark 6. However, synagogues could also belong to a specific group of people, like the synagogue of the freedmen in Acts chapter 6. Such synagogues, which are similar to what we know of as clubs, are called association synagogues. They would have been gathering places for the group that belonged to them rather than for the general population, and would not have had the town hall function of public synagogues. So most of the synagogues depicted in the Gospels are the public synagogues rather than the sectarian associations. Synagogues in the Gospels are generally depicted as gathering places belonging to local communities where Jesus could interact with the assembled people. By taking part in synagogue gatherings, Jesus was engaging with the common Judaism practiced in this early Roman period. By participating in the synagogues, Jesus was involved in normal public Jewish life. As the local town hall and a place of Jewish law, synagogues also served other civic functions, including as a court of law and justice. So that gives us some context. The Gospels depict Jesus not only teaching and proclaiming his message in synagogues, but also debating and discussing with the gathered public. It was important to be persuasive in synagogue gatherings. We can imagine how quickly someone might have been ousted if they were not persuasive. The book of Sirach presents the local assembly as a setting in which one can either attain honor through public recognition or be put to shame if you were not persuasive. There are no stories in the Gospels of Jesus being put to shame, so apparently Jesus was very persuasive. One of the reasons the crowd was amazed and astonished by Jesus' teaching goes back to what was said last week. Jesus centered his ministry around the Sea of Galilee because of the commercialization of the lake, and was taxing those who made their living from it to the point of extreme hardship. So part of Jesus' authority comes from having the right message at the right time in the right place. The message was about more equal distribution of resources and an end to the Roman Empire occupation. We can imagine there were few, if any, teachers coming to the synagogue with that message because of the fear of the Roman Empire. In this past week, I've had 2 different conversations with friends that have turned into conversation about how on earth the former president could be taking the lead as the Republican nominee. One friend said he cannot understand how 16% of black men can be backing him. Another friend said she will continue to puzzle over the white evangelical vote. Another friend decried the fact that TikTok seems to be where many people are going for their news. You should get on TikTok, Ray. What every person I have talked to admits is that Trump speaks as one who has authority. Just that fact is incredible if you go back a few years to how he gained his authority and how he has used it since. This morning in the Chicago Tribune, Clarence Page wrote an opinion piece about the border being a political pawn, the impact here in Chicago, and how Trump seems to be leading the Republican refusal to reach a border deal, even though he is no longer in office. By what authority is he leading that effort? Some have been comparing him to a cult leader, which is interesting. People are choosing to give him authority, even as he continues to be charged with crimes and convicted. So who has authority? Real authority or perceived authority, and why? As we continue to struggle with how to be followers of Christ in our present day, and as we seek to define what following looks like, we can learn something from this story in Mark. When the man with the demon, or who was deemed to have an unclean spirit, approached Jesus, the demon spoke through him. Jesus used his authority to free the man of the demon possession. At the end of the story, Jesus used his authority to heal Simon's mother-in-law of her fever. How Jesus used his authority is instructive to how we use any authority given to us. Are we using it for good or for harm? Are we using it to heal or to divide? Are we freeing people from oppression or are we oppressing? Living as a follower of Christ in this time in history is not rocket science. If I have authority and you are giving me authority and I am using that authority to oppress people or to harm or to divide you, you need to challenge my authority. Don't just willingly give it to me because it's convenient, or I deserve it after all these years, or there isn't anyone else waiting in the wings. As Christian people, we have a responsibility to hold anyone with authority or to whom we give authority accountable. When people started spreading Jesus' fame, as they told stories that circulated, the stories were about how Jesus used his authority to feed people and heal people and free people from what was possessing them to not be themselves. That was what threatened the Roman Empire because they benefited by fear and obedience and even poverty. After church this morning, we're going to gather for our annual meeting and look back at 2023 while also looking forward to this year, 2024. As a congregation, we have some authority here in Chicago. People look to us and listen to us as a voice and a community for justice here. We have some fame because of the stories told about us. What about our demons? What are the things that keep us or threaten to keep us from being integrated? Or what are the voices that threaten our well-being? Surely 2024 is a right time, right place, right message moment. Chicago is a Sea of Galilee being monetized moment because of how we are being used politically. How will we as a congregation use our authority? Will we continue to be an advocate for new arrivals even as the will to be a sanctuary city, a welcoming city, appears to be waning? Will we be clear about calling for a ceasefire in Gaza because of our clarity about never using genocide as a strategy or a response? Will we be clear about Hamas being a terrorist organization and not call them freedom fighters because when you kidnap, torture, rape, and do other despicable things, there is no justification for that? Not even saying your cause is freedom? How will we speak into this moment and use words if necessary? One of the friends I spoke with this week talked about the need to know who we are and to listen carefully to how God is leading us. He said he doesn't speak on something until he is clear because he knows he will be attacked no matter what he says. So he has to know within himself that what he is saying is what he believes to be truth. He is a more public figure than most of us, but I think he is on to something. We are living in the midst of a 30-second soundbite culture, and in that culture, everything lacks context and complexity. One of the reasons I continue to preach long sermons is my refusal to give in to that culture. My preaching is my resistance. Your listening to more than 30-second sound bites is your resistance. Jesus didn't have a big congregation if we think about his inner circle as his congregation. We don't either. But Jesus had authority because of his clarity about what God intended for the world and his unwavering commitment to that. Jesus had clarity that empires would be toppled and the beloved community would be committed to justice with love. May we, in 2024, have that same authority and use it for liberation, that all might be free, including us. Amen. That was one of my shorter sermons. You all got lucky today.